everyone. Once again, another year has come and gone. With the passage of time comes opportunities to reflect on the experiences we all had in those days now past. Given that my channel is all about, talking about entertainment, I wish to reminisce on those great movies that I experienced for the first time throughout 2023. And I'm not talking about brand new movies that came out that year.
That comes later.
I am just as invested in catching up with movies of the past as I am with movies of the present. So, just like this video that I posted back in October, I am here to rank my favorite older films that I watched for the first time this past year. Before we get into the official top 10 ranking though, I want to give a special shout out to some movies worthy of honorable mentions. After all, I watched roughly 40 older movies for the first time in 2023, so inevitably not every one of those was going to be brought up. That might not seem like a lot compared to what some other people addicted to Letterboxd watch, but I work full-time and I also have other responsibilities and hobbies that I keep up with, so I make do with the time that I get. Anyway, here are 5 movies that get the consolation prize, mentioned in alphabetical order. A Clockwork Orange may not be the last time that a Stanley Kubrick movie appears on this list, but that doesn't make the film any less worthy of praise. I admire the technical prowess on display here, and for the effort made to push tons of societal boundaries. It's violent, disturbing, and occasionally very rough to watch, but the poignant satire and craftsmanship are both strong enough to make this a worthwhile experience. If you want to hear more of my thoughts on this one, I talked about it with my friend Nathaniel Ahart last year when he invited me to participate in his series ranking the greatest films ever made. I've provided a link in the description as well as the card that should have just popped up. The Exorcist was always stigmatized as a movie that I should never touch during my youth, so naturally it took me a while to finally get around to seeing it. Imagine my surprise when I discovered that this seminal exorcism movie is not only very good, but is also quite pro-faith. At least that's how I interpreted it based on my first watch. It also resonated with me due to having a very clinical and mostly realistic approach to its subject matter, which is refreshingly different from its shallow imitators even 50 years after its original release. Getting to see the director's cut on the big screen with a crowd just a week before Halloween was a great experience indeed. Another movie I watched and discussed with Nathaniel Ahart in his aforementioned ranking video was Modern Times, a silent comedy by the great Charlie Chaplin. While it is a very accessible and enjoyable story in which we see his signature character, the tramp, fumble around various jobs during the Great Depression, the film has staying power due to the melancholy which accompanies the tramp's misadventures. The film steadily moves along from one ingenious set piece of stunt work to the next, with dashes of personal and financial tragedy interlaced between those moments of joy. What it all adds up to is something that delivers on the whimsy and fun, but leaves one with a lasting sense of empathy for those who are less fortunate in their lives. On that note, another film which was more dramatic and melancholic than I expected was Point Break. Yes, it is still very much so the movie where Keanu Reeves plays a rookie cop named Johnny Utah who tries to infiltrate a group of bank-robbing surfer bros. You get the movie that you pay for when you hear that premise, but at the same time, with someone like Catherine Bigelow in the director's chair, the story was restrained enough to allow for nuance and even a hint of tragedy to make the characters' journeys all the more interesting. The ending in particular came as a complete surprise, delivering the kind of meditation on masculinity, freedom, and rebellion that I didn't expect, but appreciated all the same. It goes to show that an action movie can have wicked stunt work and philosophy in equal measure. And last but certainly not least, we've got The Wolf of Wall Street, which I caught in theaters in time for its 10th anniversary. Between this and the other really long Scorsese film I saw in a theater this past fall, I prefer the quieter tragedy and restrained tone of Killers of the Flower Moon rather than the outrageous excess of this one. That doesn't make this film any less of an achievement though, especially in light of how much it satirizes, whether intentional or not, the culture surrounding modern financial scams. And what a satire it is. For Martin Scorsese directed the absolute crap out of it, the film remains thoroughly entertaining from beginning to end, and Leonardo DiCaprio gave one of the best performances in a career full of all-time great ones. The country club scene alone would have been enough for him to deserve the Oscar the year this came out. With those honorable mentions out of the way, it's time to reveal my 10 favorite older films I watched in 2023, ranked in terms of how much I loved them. We'll start with
Number 10.
If a film truly wants to go insane with its premise, then it has to commit to the insanity. Thankfully, that's exactly what director John Landis, as well as stars Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi did when they made The Blues Brothers back in 1980. Seriously, you can't just make this crap up, certainly not today anyway. In what is ostensibly a film adaptation of a running gag on SNL, this is one of the most insane blockbusters I have ever seen. And I mean that as the highest form of praise I can give it, because the bonkers but well-handled variety of tones and balls-to-the-wall lunacy add up to something that I had an absolute blast with from start to finish. That's saying a lot for a studio comedy that's over 2 hours long. But hey, these guys stretched every penny of their budget to make sure that all of their ideas were put on the screen as best as they possibly could. I mean, really, this movie has got everything. Huge musical numbers, Carrie Fisher with a bazooka, hilarious gags, and some of the best car chases in the history of cinema. In terms of raw spectacle and pure entertainment value, The Blues Brothers was some of the most fun I had in the theater all of last year. This film just made me appreciate John Landis as the master of the comedy genre that he was, which just makes me all the more excited that the next episode of my I Have Never Seen series will be about his follow-up film, An American Werewolf in London. I look forward to rewatching The Blues Brothers many times over the years, especially in the company of family and friends.
Number 9!
From a 2022 list of favorite first-time watches, a war film was ranked as number 9, just as is the case here with Full Metal Jacket. This also isn't the first time that a Stanley Kubrick movie appeared on this list, and while I really enjoyed both this and A Clockwork Orange, there's something about a small-scale war film that really speaks to me. It's hard to put into words why this genre always piques my interest, since I'm not in the military myself, but what I can say about Full Metal Jacket is that I can appreciate the truly human story at its center. The cold and calculated touch of Stanley Kubrick as director helped this story stand out more effectively than it could have otherwise, since his darkly comedic script works wonders when juxtaposed against the destruction shown at various points in the story. The audience is then forced to reckon with the shocking realities of what they're seeing. For 1 minute you may be laughing at the colorful insults pouring out of Arlie Ermey's mouth, and then the next you'll be thinking about the hard ramifications of the war machine. This goes both for the young American men whose innocence was stripped away from them in exchange for M16s, as well as the Vietnamese that were gunned down and violated by those same men. I guess what I really admire about this film in particular is that it can be enjoyed on a surface level due to its comedic edge, but there's plenty of substance within it on a deeper level. After all, it's a movie that can legitimately teach you something about the horrors of war, while it has also penetrated pop culture enough that it's gotten referenced in StarCraft of all things.
What is your major malfunction, numbnuts?
What is your major malfunction?
Number 8!
And here we arrive at yet another war movie, although one of a different caliber than what I just talked about. The first of 2 Sidney Lumet films to appear on this list, Failsafe differs from the aforementioned movie in that rather than depicting war from the perspective of boots on the ground, the story remains situated in airtight rooms full of generals and other intelligence officers. But that doesn't make it any less compelling, for anyone who's willing to settle in for a slow burn will be rewarded with one of the most suspenseful and tragic cautionary tales about nuclear war that you could find. This resonates especially strong nowadays, with us living in an age where the idea of stewardship over weapons of mass destruction being handed over to AI is frighteningly closer each day. Pairs nicely as a double feature with Oppenheimer, I guess. I'm probably not selling the film all that well with how I'm describing it, since I know most of you watching this would probably rather watch a movie to escape from reality rather than facing it head on. And hey, I get it. I know Failsafe wouldn't be for everyone. But what good is art if it doesn't move us to think about the world around us and consider other perspectives? Perhaps more importantly, what good is history if we can't learn from it, or learn from the lessons that those who suffered through history told for future generations? Failsafe serves that purpose quite effectively, and deserves to be reckoned with for that reason.
Number 7!
I won't talk about Miracle on 34th Street too much, since I already talked about it at length in my I Have Never Seen review earlier in December, but I was surprised by how good this movie was. Not that I expected it to disappoint, given its reputation, but what shocked me was how mature and thoughtful its storyline was. Rather than simply being a purely fantastical story about whether Santa is real or not, the screenplay and filmmaking consigned to telling a story that is more about how the attributes of someone like Santa can help make the world a more tolerable place to live in. Not to mention that there's plenty of subtext to read into when viewing said story from a Christian lens. By the time this video is out, Christmas would have been long gone, but it's definitely worth checking out next Christmas if you're clamoring for new holiday movies to watch.
Number 6!
The second of two Sidney Lumet films to be featured on this list, Dog Day Afternoon is the more popular and widely recognized achievements of his, and rightfully so. The filmmaking and storytelling here is just so captivating and firmly rooted in the moment that it's hard to remove your eyes from the screen for a single minute. And what makes this even better is that the film doesn't deliberately take sides in the conflict, choosing instead to show different aspects of what led to the main bank robbery in the story. By doing so, it allows the audience to experience everything right along with the perpetrators, police, and random bystanders who are starving for distractions from their miserable lives. All of this doesn't change the fact that the main characters are criminals, but the film is very effective at making you understand and empathize with why they chose to go through with their plan. The filmmaking goes a long way to emphasizing those things to the point that you feel the stress of each moment, whether it's the tension of a possible firefight breaking out or sweat dripping down someone's face. And of course, the performances are all incredible, with Al Pacino standing out in a lead role that demands him to show extreme amounts of vulnerability, especially as his character's sanity and livelihood are called into question during the ordeal. It's often said that they just don't make movies like they used to, and with this being a crime thriller that stimulates the brain as much as it does the senses, the same could be said about the 70s classic.
Number 5.
Roman Holiday was the earliest film on this list that I saw in 2023, so that should demonstrate how deeply it impacted me. I just found this to be an irresistible delight of a romantic comedy, one that still manages to be better than the majority that have been made in the years thereafter. One reason I could point to for that is Audrey Hepburn's character Princess Anne is hungry for some freedom, and she gets that by escaping from her royal duties to play hooky in Rome. Director William Wyler and his crew did a lot to make this location feel like the setting for an urban fairy tale, adding to the film's infectious sense of, well, for lack of a better word, romance. The story involving Gregory Peck's down-on-his-luck journalist could have given way to the tired cliches that plagued rom-coms in the decades since, but that story and how it intersects with Princess Anne makes for a truly wholesome, surprising, and heartfelt adventure through the city that melted away any sense of cynicism that I had. Roman Holiday just cemented for me that the kinds of romance stories I respond to most strongly are all about what the two partners give each other in their courtship, however long or short the encounter may be. With this story being as eventful and playful as it is, I think it should be easy to see why it became an instant favorite of mine. And hey, if there was ever any movie that the lovely Audrey Hepburn deserved to win an Oscar for, it was certainly this one.
Number 4.
I don't know if my dad movie tendencies kicked in earlier than it does for most guys, but I've just been fascinated by World War II for the longest time. The German film Downfall, in particular, has had my curiosity for many years as well, not just for the memes that have spawned from that one Steiner scene that everybody knows, but because of the sheer audacity of its premise. Who in their right mind would really make a film that attempts to make Hitler relatable? Well, clearly director Oliver Hirschspiegel and his screenwriter did something right, because what they and the cast and crew put together here is nothing short of remarkable. The creative choice that really saved this production and miraculously made its story gel is that the audience is a fly on the wall from beginning to end. While the story may be somewhat skewed towards the perspective of Hitler's personal secretary, there is no attempt to place this story firmly within anyone's POV, Hitler or otherwise. The camera just remains as a silent observer, roaming through the hallways of Hitler's bunker and acting as a war correspondent while the decisive Battle of Berlin rages on. All of this adds up to a film that is undeniably exhausting, but remains necessary and visceral due to how plainly it depicts the fanatical evil of the Nazi regime. Just as I had alluded to earlier in this video, history needs to be studied so that we as a species can learn to avoid making the mistakes of the past. No film that I watched in 2023 did that better than Downfall.
Number 3.
Park Chan-wook's most iconic film is certainly as brutal, disturbing, and stomach-churning as you always heard it is, but that doesn't make Oldboy any less of a masterwork. As someone who does a lot of writing and editing in their spare time, I take notice when a movie does something truly special with both. For one thing, this is far more interesting than just your typical revenge thriller, given all of the insane twists and character moments that are realized throughout the movie's duration. Strong dialogue and performances did their part to keep me glued into this wacky yet engaging engaging story. But yes, editing and shot composition play a key role here too, for the film moves along and presents itself in a comic book-like style that I haven't really seen replicated elsewhere, and it kept me locked into whatever was happening. A lesser movie would probably falter under the accusations of emphasizing style over substance, but with Oldboy, the style often informs the substance and enhances it to make for a truly rewarding cinematic experience. It's the kind of movie that would benefit from scrutinizing every single shot and seeing how it adds to the big picture, even though it'd probably be a while before I watch it again due to how messed up its storyline is. Don't let that deter you from watching Oldboy though, for this is an unforgettable good time nonetheless.
Number 2.
If there's anything that 2023 taught me about myself, is that I really love a good courtroom drama. I mean, there are few better ways to establish something being at stake than lawyers, witnesses, and a judge arguing over someone's livelihood. Anatomy of a Murder captures this feeling better than most movies due to the incredibly sharp writing and the performances which carry such dialogue. It takes great skill for actors to recite their lines in such a way that each word feels natural, and that's exactly what each performer did here, cluing me in with sharp attention to every spoken line and gesture of body language. This works to great effect for a movie that doesn't try to bathe any of its characters in a completely positive or negative light, even our all-American small-town lawyer played by my favorite actor Jimmy Stewart. For nearly 3 hours, this superbly entertaining drama kept me gripped with its genuinely surprising and satisfying murder mystery, the likes of which unravels in and out of the courtroom. It also features one of my favorite musical scores I've heard all year, with Duke Ellington's energetic jazz movements working in tandem with the noir-like tone of the film. While it may be one of the more unassuming movies on this list, that doesn't make it any less compelling. Seek this one out if you're thrilled by movies of people talking. My number one pick is admittedly a cheat, since I had mostly seen Titanic before. But I want to emphasize the word mostly, because growing up, I had absolutely no interest in the romantic side of this movie. I was a dumb, idiot kid who just liked seeing the ship breaking apart and sinking on the second VHS tape. I never watched the first half prior to the iceberg collision. I also grew up under the assumption that this whole movie was overrated, since it was such a pop culture titan that it just couldn't live up to the massive hype surrounding it. Once I wised up and realized that James Cameron has made banger after banger over the years, I took the chance to see it in theaters for its 4K restoration back in February. Once I did, everything made sense.
All the wasted years!
Now, the thing about Titanic, though, is that I could point to every other movie on this list and identify an aspect of it that was probably done better than Titanic. I won't be the first, nor the last to admit that the film has some corny dialogue, archetypal characters, and the paint me like one of your French girls scene is just awkward, man. I'm sorry, it just is, especially when your mom is sitting next to you in the theater. But when I think of my all-time favorite movies, they stick with me because the sum of their parts creates magic. James Cameron's Best Picture winning epic is everything that a director would ever want their movie to turn out as. A spectacle that dazzles the eyes, stirs the heart, and stimulates the senses. His film doesn't make light of the tragedy behind this true story either, for even with the spectacular visual effects that still hold up wonderfully to this day, you can just tell that he made this in complete reverence to the lives that were needlessly lost that cold April night in 1912. Centering it all on the romance and eventual bout for survival that Jack and Rose go through together makes for one of the most riveting films ever made, even with it clocking in at over 3 hours. It fills me with regret that I wasted so many years dismissing this film in its entirety, but at least now I can continue to cherish it with the film being added to my Blu-ray collection, and in the months since, it has inspired me to learn as much as I can about the Titanic and how that has impacted history. Like I said earlier, movies are best when they can take all of their various elements and stitch them together into magic. Titanic will continue to endure throughout the ages for that very reason, because through the thick of its infamous production, somehow James Cameron's cast and crew pulled off the unthinkable. That is truly what the movies are all about. And that's it. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and for sticking with me for another year on this channel. Truly, thank you. I cannot stress that enough. And for those who are new to the channel, welcome! It truly is a pleasure to know that these videos are making some kind of difference in the world, no matter how big or small it may be. Here's to hoping for another bright, promising year in 2024. If you liked what you saw and would be eager to see more of what I have to offer, please consider subscribing to the channel and join the notification squadron so that you won't miss out on my future videos. Feel free to leave a comment stating what your favorite movies of 2023 were as well, whether they were new releases or older films that you caught up with for the first time. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you all have a great one.